Welcome to Rich Planets TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. It's the eve of the first UK Exopolitics conference being held in Liverpool, and I've travelled here to speak to Dan Sherman. Now, Dan is a veteran of the US Air Force and served from 1982 to 1995. We're going to describe his experiences during those years, and for anyone not familiar with his story, stay tuned, because the possible implications of the information in this story are nothing short of earth-changing. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, now, I want to start, Dan, by asking you a little bit about your childhood, because I wouldn't normally on my show ask people about their childhood, but it could be relevant in your case. And viewers will become aware of why that is later in the interview. But just describe your childhood growing up. Did you have a normal childhood?
It wasn't as normal as I would have liked, but much of the part that wasn't normal had a lot to do with just things that happened in my life, not having to do with the project or anything like that.
Okay.
But I did have a couple of incidences where it could have been related to that. I've fallen before off of a garage, and it was quite a bit of a drop. It was probably 25 feet, 30 feet onto cement, and I crashed onto the cement on my back, and as I look back on it, I felt like there was a little bit of a cushioning there because I just walked away from it, and right on my back hit my neck and my head, and I got up and walked away. So just things like that. They're maybe a little bit odd.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about grades? How were you academically?
Middle of the road.
Okay.
I could have been better if I'd applied myself, but
Right.
that's probably the story of many people.
Right. Okay. And you didn't notice any abilities at this stage when you were young that you may have had?
Not anything that could tangibly be assigned to what went on with my life, but or with the what we're going to get into,
Yes.
The abductions and stuff. But I think that I've always been a little bit more intuitive than your average person.
Right.
I sense people's emotions a little bit easier, I think. But other than that, no.
But you
nothing.
didn't think you were different in any way?
Not really, no.
Okay. And you signed up for the Air Force. Was that something that you had in your mind firmly from a young age, or were you pushed into it? Or
Yeah, actually, in fourth grade, I was befriended by a SR-71 pilot, and he was stationed at Beale Air Force Base in California. I lived near the base there, and he took a special interest in me. He would always talk to me about the Air Force, and he brought me to the Air Force Base, and he said, "You really should go into the Air Force. It's a great way of life. You'll have fun, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll travel." And this was in fourth grade, and I think ever since then I was enamored with the fact of going into the Air Force. So,
do you think he was a plant?
I believe that it's entirely possible.
Possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pushing me in that direction.
Sure. All right. So you entered the Air Force, and how long was it before? Was it just a standard job in the Air Force then? Or?
Yeah. When I joined, I joined as a security policeman, and I spent actually a majority of my time as a security policeman, and then I transferred or cross-trained into the electronic intelligence field, and there was a lot of things behind that pushed me in that direction too, and it was very hard to get a cross-train, although I got a cross-train fairly easily. So again, you look back on it and you put two and two together, and you think, okay, somebody's pushing me in that direction, because in order to be associated with the things that I need to be associated with in the Gray Project that I worked on, you would have had to have had really top-level security clearances and a reason to be at those bases. And being in this new career field would have allowed that. So,
Right. And are you able to name any bases?
not that I was assigned. Well, I take that back. I was at two bases that I conducted this job at. And in the book, I refer to them as PPD base number 1 and 2, and PPD it corresponds to the name of the project, Project Preserve Destiny. So two bases I was assigned to for that, and one of them has been decommissioned since I was in the Air Force. So I can say that. But the reason why I don't, or I hadn't in the past named any of the bases, because I was assigned to black projects in conjunction with the gray project. So I can't really reveal timelines and associating a base with the fact that I said that I was in a black project. So it's kind of a touchy situation, and one of the reasons why a lot of people don't come forward, because they they can reveal information that they don't need to.
Right. So can you name that decommissioned base?
Yeah, the decommissioned base that I was at San Vito de Norman.
Okay.
Well, it's actually San Vito, but then there's a long Italian name after it, de Normandie or something like that.
What state is that?
It was in the southern part of Italy, near Brindisi.
Okay, in Italy, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you say that the other base was in Europe as well, or not?
No, it was in the States, yeah.
Right, okay. Now then, you mentioned Black Project and Grey Project. Just my understanding of Black Project is when they want to do a secret project, they want to put money into it, it will be known publicly the general area of research, but not a great deal more. So what I've heard you say is that within that, they then have a Grey Project where it's completely different to what they've told the outside world. So they've got this piece of money which is ring-fenced, and they're doing all kinds of completely unknown stuff in there. Is that basically the...
Yeah. To kind of elaborate more on the Black Project, you may think that they've given you a nugget of information to go off of for the Black Project, but that nugget of information is probably not even true.
Right.
So the Black Project is extremely classified, and its function really has a lot to do with national security and security of the Western world in a lot of cases. So there is justification there, and the only people that have access to that information are very, very high-level government civilian, perhaps maybe the chairman of the budget committee in Congress, and
so even he's being duped. Is what you're saying.
Well, no, he probably is aware of some of it,
Right.
but other than that, or he or she, whatever, they're probably aware of it, but hardly anybody other than that, other than in the military, and probably the president. But I would assume. I would even think that some presidents don't have access to all of it because of their ideology, and so.
Yeah. So, what year were you allowed to give the year when you were first taken into the Grey Project?
It was shortly after I did my cross train, probably in the early '90s, I would say.
Right. Okay. So, just describe that experience for me.
Well, I had gotten orders, paperwork to go to a school for my normal job. My normal job was ELINT, which is electromagnetic communications. It's a intelligence. You derive intelligence from radar emissions and anything that has to do with emissions, electromagnetic emissions. And so I was going to a school to further my knowledge in that area. I had already gone to my actual basic technical course for that, and I was already stationed at a base doing my job. But then I went on to another advanced course, and it's called EA 280, that was held at the National Security Agency in Fort Meade, Maryland. And so I got there, and I got a call from a captain who said he needed to meet with me. And of course, at this time, I think I was a sergeant, staff sergeant. And so you don't normally get a call on your TDY base, temporary duty base, from a captain directly saying, I need to meet with you. It's typically through the chain of command that you would be told anything. So right then I thought, okay, something is going on. This is very odd. So I was called, and we met. We met at the complex, the main complex of NSA, and did some stuff to get me into the building, and so we went into his office, and he told me that I was going to be there for two schools, the one that I had previously known about, and then another one, and then he proceeded to unfold this amazing piece of information to me, and told me I was
very skeptical of initially. You weren't sure what was going on.
Yeah, well, anybody I think would be. Of course, he was very serious, and you don't typically get pranked by somebody high up that you don't know. Is not in your direct chain of command that you work with in your office or whatever. So it was so startling that you have to initially be skeptical. I mean, because you just don't jump headlong into something that is so amazing and so outrageous. But that passed within a few minutes probably, because of course the scenario or the scene was set, and it was a very serious scene. So
Right. So he told you that something had happened to your mother when she was pregnant with you, and that there'd been an adjustment made to you when you were in the womb.
yeah, he said he mentioned that this was a project called Project Preserve Destiny, and it started in the early '60s as a result of communication that the American government had with an alien race in 1947.
So he actually told you that, then,
Yeah,
the sergeant, right?
No, captain.
And he specifically said captain. He specifically said 1947.
Yeah, and at the time I didn't, I didn't know what 1947 meant. It was just another year to me.
So, but he didn't mention Roswell. He just said 1947.
No.
Do you think he was referring to Roswell or not?
Well, that's the only thing I can assume now,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
knowing what I know now. But
Right.
at the time, that was just a year for me.
And did he mention any other years, any other dates other
Well,
than 47?
He mentioned that the project itself had kicked off in, I believe he said 1961.
All right.
And they started to abduct human females for testing for this genetic procedure that they were going to conduct. And when I say they, it was a joint project with the alien race, whatever you want to call it, and the American government. And
So let me just interrupt you there, Dan. So they were abducting human women to see if they had certain genetic characteristics to be chosen to then give birth to you.
Yes.
And you said it was joint. So you think that, because you describe it as a military abduction, so it's not necessarily military, it's a joint thing. So do you think it's the alien technology that was being used for the abduction rather than the military technology?
Oh yeah, I think, let me back up here. The actual abductions themselves were conducted by the aliens.
Right.
And the procedures were done by the aliens. I say it was in conjunction with the military because the military knew about it, and they were,
Right.
they were...
Right, and this captain, he told you all this in this first meeting?
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
Okay.
And so my mother was one of the chosen targets, or whatever you want to call it.
To interrupt you again, and did he say what this specific genetic thing was that they were looking for?
No.
Right, okay.
No. Just that I think, I just surmise now that certain people have a predisposition for this particular thing that they needed to heighten.
Right.
So they needed to choose certain people that had that predisposition.
Right.
So that was what I assumed. He did not tell me that, but that's what I assumed afterwards. So my mother was chosen, and in 1963 she was abducted for this purpose, and I was conceived probably October, I believe, because I was born in April '64, or September, whatever that was, and then I came to be in April of 1964, and then the project itself closed down. The genetic management portion of it closed down in 1968. He told me.
Right. So they stopped abducting people in 1968.
Yeah.
Okay, let's write that down, because so 68. So you can get the age range of people who've had this change then.
Yeah.
And did he say how many other people?
No, he never gave me any numbers, and I do assume that it was not just American people either. I think it was probably the project itself was probably joint with other Western allies, I would imagine.
Okay.
So
Okay, so you're now drafted into this secret project, and you're doing two jobs at the same time, basically. You're doing 8 hours in electronic intelligence, and then for another 8 hours you're taken somewhere. Just explain.
it was about 4 hours.
4 hours
Yeah.
a day. So just explain that segment and the initial training that you were given first.
Sure. Well, as soon as I got done with my regular school, I would come back to my hotel. I was staying at the Holiday Inn there in Linthicum, Maryland, and this van would come about 45 minutes after I got back to the hotel. This van would come by and pull up to the front. I'd get in the van, and they would take me somewhere, and they would always vary the route, so I could never really figure out where I was going based on where we're going left and right and distances. And I'd say between 10 and 20 minutes later, we'd arrive at the destination, and I would get out of the van, and it was in a garage type of a building, cement everywhere. And I would get out of the van, and I'd go up to a door, and it had a security procedure on it. It had a hand print where I'd put my hand up to the door.
Did you think this was underground?
I got the impression that it was.
Right, okay.
although I had to go in an elevator to go down to the actual classroom, so the only reason I think that is because I never really saw daylight coming through any cracks or anything. That doesn't necessarily mean it was underground, but that's what I assumed. So I would go down in the elevator, and it would open up into the classroom, and there would be 2 stations, one on the left, one on the right. And I actually went through school with another person that was doing it too, but we could never talk to one another. We were instructed never to discuss anything with anybody, obviously. And even the person that was going through it at the same time, we could never talk. So my station was on the left, and it was just, all it was there was a computer monitor, and initially, and then a mouse a little bit later for doing other things.
And just a visualization, what size computer monitor?
At the time, this was a long time ago, so a big monitor was 27 inches.
Yeah.
And
19 inches was a big monitor.
Yeah. So I think it was about 27-inch monitor,
right,
and it was one of the fat ones, that went back into
CRT,
the console.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it was a huge one for that
Well,
era.
it would have been, yeah. Right, all right. So then what?
I would just sit down, and I got my initial, the captain met me he took me to the classroom initially, and he told me what to do and what I would do when I come in. So I just come in, I sit down, I put my headphones on, and...
just to interrupt there, just a daft question. This is 91, 2, or?
Yeah, it's in the early 90s, yeah.
Pre-Windows environments.
Well, we had much more sophisticated software than the normal consumer did. So we did have a windowed environment.
Unix type environment sort of thing.
Yeah, but it did have a UI. It had a Windows type of UI.
Really?
It was actually I think it was made by there's a Solaris, or there's a name, Solar or something.
Right.
They did military programming, and we had very, for that time, very sophisticated. It wasn't like a ASCII, the green glowing screen. It wasn't like that.
Right.
We had
Okay.
Much better screens. Anyway, so yeah, there was just, but it really didn't need a lot of UI for this, because we just needed 10 boxes and a sine wave going through each box. So there wasn't a lot of design necessary. So I would sit there, and initially I would hear a tone in my earphones, and I had an instructor that would audibly, talk to me through the headphones. And it was a human. I know there's a lot of questions about that, but it sounded like a human anyway, talking to me. And I would concentrate on this tone that they would play through the earphones. And initially it took like 4 days for the first one. So I would sit there for 4 hours listening to the same tone.
And trying to mentally repeat the tone.
Exactly. The instruction was to don't audibilize it, but you have to mentally try to hum that tone in your mind. So if you try to do that, you can do that. It just takes a lot of concentration and a lot of boredom.
And did the tone stop when you were trying to mentally hum it, or was it continuing?
No,
to go?
it would go constantly.
Right, it would go.
Yeah, so I could match my
mind
and then, with it.
So you had a box, and then what happened in small boxes on the screen?
Well, they weren't,
all right,
like
okay,
that, yeah.
Right.
So there was a sine wave that went through it. It was like a 360-degree sine wave, 180 degrees below the middle line and 180 degrees above the middle line. And the goal was, and this is as it was told to me, the goal was to flatten that sine wave.
All right.
And of course, I had a question like, how am I going to, I don't understand what, he said, just listen to the tone and mentally hum it. Just continue to do that, and it'll go from there. So I just took the instruction at face value, and I just did that. It took about 4 days, but then finally something, and I write in the book about how it clicked, but it wasn't an audible click. It was just my way of describing what happened. It kind of just went like that, and it actually happened where the line flickered a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that was shocking to me, because here I am manipulating something on the screen that I have no connection to.
No physical connection.
Yeah. Other than the headphones, and of course, that there was nothing there. It was just a headphone.
Can I just interrupt you there, Dan?
Sure.
When I heard that part, I thought, well, the computer technology is possibly NSA conventional Earth-based technology. So I thought there's maybe the device that's actually sensing your mind is then interfaced somehow to the computer.
Yeah.
So it's some interfacing
I assume
device.
that too. I assume that too.
But you were never shown that. It wasn't a
No,
box
no.
or a...
For all I know, it could have been an alien that was somehow interfaced with the computer to do that.
Right.
I don't know.
But you weren't shown any of that. So could you actually see the tower, or was it a tower?
No. I just saw the monitor.
Just the monitor. So you couldn't see any of the other technology. None of that's on display.
No.
Okay. All right.
Which of course is frustrating if you're a curious person.
Yeah.
So anyway, the line flickered, and I felt the sensation that I would later come to know as a comm, or intuitive communications.
Just for viewers, a comm is short for communication.
Yeah, yeah, we called it comms, receiving comms.
Mm-hmm.
It happened, and then I just continued to practice that and continued to mentally hum that tone to the point where I think what it was is it was strengthening this muscle in my mind that didn't. It was not there or barely there, and it was starting to strengthen it, and then it started to take over and knew what to do. Okay. It's the only really way I can describe it, because it's not like a book learning where you learn one section and then you learn chapter 2 and then you learn chapter 3. It just started to grow on itself. Eventually, I was able to flatten the entire line of the first box, and then I went on to the second box, and it was a different tone for that one. And then it just replicated itself. The first box, second box, third box,
and were these just kind of standard musical type tones, like middle C or bottom F kind of thing, and they were slightly different in pitch?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So you then could flatten the second line, and there were 10 boxes altogether.
Yeah. So I had to. My initial lessons were to flatten each line separately, and then it went from there to flattening two lines in two boxes at the same time,
simultaneously.
Yeah, and then 3.
Like playing a chord almost.
Exactly.
Right.
Although, and I use, I described the tone. There's a tone being played, but that was only to unlock what was going on. It had nothing to do with audible types of things. It had nothing to do with that. Yeah, in the final form, it didn't have anything to do with that.
So then you had control over 10 lines then. And then what happened?
Well, they started to feed me images, like videos and still images of just various things.
On the terminal?
Yeah, on the terminal. And then I would...
was this a window on the terminal and the other 10 boxes were still there?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But what would happen is I would receive the communication about that particular image or video, and I could see...
So hang on, you said receive. Prior to this, you are outputting information, and that's having an effect. So you're saying that information was now starting to come back.
Exactly. But it was... It's the same.
Right.
It's the same thing, really,
right.
Because the sensation is there in your mind to generate it, and it's there in your mind to receive it. So it's the same.
Okay.
Same medium, I guess you could say.
Right. Right.
But
a bit like plucking a guitar string, you can either, I guess, it's sort of externally being plucked, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. You can do either one. You can listen to it or you can play it, but you know what it is.
Yeah.
But again, we can't get into the sound analogies because there was no sound involved. But although, when I say there's no sound involved, I could receive the data of a sound and understand what it translated into in my human senses. Yeah. But there was no physical sensation in the ear, I guess you can say.
Right. So they're feeding you various pictures, and what are they saying that the combination of box 1, 3, and 5 makes a tank?
Well, at this point, it wasn't a one-to-one correlation that I was applying to the lesson. It was more of, it was just feeding me the information, and that muscle was learning on its own. I could see in my peripheral vision when I was looking at the video or the picture, I could see the boxes going, just doing all kinds of stuff. But I wasn't looking at the boxes and going, okay, that assigns that, and that. No, I wasn't doing that. It's just the mind was learning on its own.
But like when you hear a word, you don't think of all the letters in it. You just know the word.
Yeah, exactly. But in that analogy, you had to actually learn the letters first, which is the boxes that I was going through. Actually, it would be more of not letters, but concepts and ideas, actually.
So, okay, I can understand how it could show you different pictures of images and say that picture represents this combination or this perhaps pattern of or combination of tone. Which is a word I'm actually looking for. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to put
profile, shall we say, of combinations.
But even within that analogy, you have to look at. It wasn't the rest period or the resting of where that tone was or that line. Later on, we get away from tones, but the line, it actually corresponded also to the rate of change of that line, of that sine wave. So it didn't necessarily mean this means this means that, but it means this means that, and this means that. The motion, the actual rate of change. So it was an infinite amount of information that could be
conveyed.
Yeah.
Right. So how did it teach you more subtle concepts which can't be represented in a picture? Such as happiness, or
through the pictures and images, you could convey happiness and things like that through the picture. So I don't think there was anything that needed a specifically different input to get that learning. Essentially, they had programmed it, or they had designed all the images and all the videos and all that stuff to actually unlock everything that needed to be unlocked within the comms.
Now, do you think that was the people who wrote the software for that, and that education software, you might call it? Do you think that was all humans doing that, or do you think it was a combination of alien and human?
I had really never thought of it. I would imagine that it would have to have had some alien input. I mean,
and some human input, possibly.
Yeah, Well, the hardware and all that stuff. I think it had to be. Had to be a joint effort, I would believe.
Right. All right. So with the knowledge that at some point you were going to be used for something, because you got quite frustrated about all that, didn't you?
Yeah, it was very frustrating later on when I became operational and things started to happen.
But you were on hold, kind of thing.
Yeah, I was on hold. Once I graduated from the school, I went back to my regular base. And I was just told when I left by my control person for that project. He said, at some point in the future, I will be introducing you to your next control officer, and then you will do your job as the intuitive communicator as well. So I just had to sit and wait. I went back to my base. I got orders to go to another base, which turned out to be the first base that I would be operational as a IC. But that was several months in waiting. So I was just kind of, I never knew from one moment to the next when I would actually start doing this.
And just as an aside, did you ever see any other technology around the place, like test equipment or monitoring equipment?
Well, there was always equipment around my workplace that had to do with my regular job. But so nothing that I would, there was nothing other than the monitor, which doubled as my regular monitor for my regular job, but I would use that to open up the window to report comms.
Now, some people might describe what you've been given as training in telepathy. Would you describe it as that?
Well, from what I've read about telepathy, it has some similarities. I think it's much more complex.
Telepathy is, or this is?
The intuitive communication.
Right.
I think
Do you think it's using the same muscle as you describe it?
I really cannot.
You don't know.
I can't
it's
say
something
that.
in the brain, though.
Yeah. I mean, it has to do with the brain, but it also, telepathy is not necessarily something that's two-way. you know, it's just a sensing or whatever. I guess it could be two-way,
Right.
you know, depending on the...
Now, just to get to the technical side of things, electromagnetic communications and communication down wires travel at the speed of light. Did you get any feeling as to that this was the same?
I don't think it's the same. I think that the medium or the transmission or whatever you want to call it, I don't think it actually. I think it broke the bounds of physics.
Right. So,
I don't
so
think
it could be
applied.
interdimensional then.
Yeah, I don't think it
Because
applied to physics.
Yeah, because if you've got a point over here and over there in 3 dimensions, in a 4th dimension, it could be right next to each other. If it's using another dimension, which is impossible to conceive of.
It gets very esoteric, obviously, but I don't believe that it was of our laws that we recognize as physics.
Right. All right. Now, you mentioned that this was a grey project, and you've attached to that it has input from aliens. Why necessarily should that mean that it's alien, that it was grey project?
Sure. I guess you'd have to ask the people that invented that term.
Right.
I don't know. When I was initially brought into the program, they referred to it as a slant mission. They referred to it as a gray. So
But
I
they
don't know
also
the
told you
reason.
that aliens were involved.
Yeah, when he described the onion effect with the security classifications, he mentioned that the black projects, you know, were at a certain level, and then gray projects, which have to do with alien technology, research and development, or communication. Any of those things, they were classified as a gray project.
Right. Okay. And did they tell you at all where these aliens were from?
No.
None of that.
No locations.
Or how long they'd been here?
No.
At least 1947 then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I did during my. We'll probably talk about it a little bit, but during my communications, I did ask some questions directly, and I got the sense that they had been here for a very long time.
Really?
Yeah, on Earth for a very long time.
But not directly communicating with.
No, not necessarily. Although they could have been,
Right.
but I didn't get the sense either way of whether they were communicating early on or not.
And what do you think about theories of people such as Bob Lazar has mentioned that they have actually tinkered with our genetics in the past several times?
I firmly believe that. I got that impression as well
Really?
from a question that I had asked. I believe that at some point in our history they have intermingled with our DNA.
Right.
And I think that possibly is part of why we can even be, you know, this project could even exist.
Right.
Because we have maybe a portion of their DNA.
Right. Now, you said that you were enhanced genetically in the early stages in the womb. How much do you have a feel as to whether it was you were 1% and they made it to 100%, or do you have any feel as to whether there are people who wouldn't need that enhancement who just naturally might have that ability?
Well, I don't think that could be this particular ability because because they would not have needed to do the genetic management procedure. They would just have to have found whoever it was that had that particular heightened whatever they needed for the project. So the fact that they had to be proactive and do something leads me to believe that no, that's
right. And are you aware of the Greada Treaty, this 1954 alleged meeting with President Eisenhower and some ETs?
I'm aware of that. I mean, I've read about that particular event. I didn't correlate it with that name, but yeah.
I'll just touch on something that this is alleged to have been agreed,
Sure.
and that is that the allegedly what happened was that it was concern was expressed that the aliens had been carrying out abductions, and that the U.S. military said to them, look, we want to know who you're abducting, where they're being taken from, we want lists, etc. So I've actually just made the assumption that you receiving the abduction reports is possibly them agreeing that they're part of that agreement.
That's an interesting correlation. I had never really thought of that, but that's entirely possible, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if they had agreed to provide information,
Yeah.
then perhaps the aliens thought, well, we're not going to pass it to you via ancient EM comms. We're going to do it with our method.
Yeah, well, before the Project Preserve Destiny, if they were doing it before then, they'd have had to find a different messenger, I guess. But
Right.
yeah, I think
so
that's entirely possible. Yeah.
Now, from people who I've interviewed who have bumped into people working in, one particular secret group in the UK, they allege that it's the NSA who controls some of our GCHQ listening bases of UFOs. And I've heard from one guy who's supposed to be in some special forces team that the people who are monitoring UFO activity actually get heads-up information from somewhere. They know what nights they're going to be here on, in other words, and they know where they're going to be. Do you think that kind of information could be being passed through through similar methods?
Well, I believe that the information that I was getting actually was test information, not necessarily fictitious information, but stuff that it could be happening, but they selected it based on just keeping my talent alive and thriving, and you know, like a muscle, you just got to work it. So I don't think the content was necessarily important content. It was just content that needed to be passed, and why not pass it through them, because they need the muscle, you know, exercising.
Okay, now let's just come on to that, because you believe that once you've got put on this live project, you would be passed information and you had to type that into a terminal, and it was a string of digits, basically. Just describe what happened on that project and what the information you were being passed.
Well, when we had the string of digits, it just came through as numbers. That's why it was a string of digits.
So you can pass numbers using this method as well, just numbers.
But also I described events and you know, conveyed imagery through text, you know, by describing it.
Okay.
But one of the examples I give in the book is the string of text, and that was just one of the strings. The reason why I put the string of text in there is because I was trying to convey the reason why I was getting upset, because I started to what I thought was I started to receive what I thought was abduction data, and it had, you know, things like potentiality for recall and residual pain levels and things like that, and it tended to be all numbers
and longitude and latitude. So could you actually recall in date and time as well? Could you, when you, let's say you've received one of these strings, because I know you probably didn't have anything that you could write anything down or take anything out. No. But were you able to recall it and write it down in your hotel room?
No, I seem to remember several times trying to remember the numbers for later looking up on a map, and I can't know that or tell you this for sure, but I think I correlated some locations, like to Florida one time. But I have a very fuzzy memory about it, so I don't want to, you know.
So they were so you think they were using standard human
latitudes and longitudes?
And time and date.
That's what it looked like. Now it could have been just a complete coincidence that those numbers look like latitudes and longitudes, and I looked up and Florida was just, you know, happened to be one of those numbers.
Now, when you were put on this live project, you thought you were communicating with one particular ET, and then at some later time there was a different one. Was there any difference in like the feeling towards the different aliens? How could you tell it was a different alien?
You could definitely tell. It was even more distinct than, I think, talking to two human beings over the phone. Because when you talk to somebody over the phone, you don't get near the level of information that you get when you do intuitive communication. So
more information than actually visually communicating, or
it actually is visual, because when you're getting the communication, our human body or our human mind functions in a way that we translate whatever we get. We translate that into imagery, just automatically. You know, when I say the word orange to you, in your mind you just automatically think of an orange color. So when I get the intuitive communications, I get a picture, although it's not it's not somebody sending me a picture. It's an intuitive communications, but I translate it as a human into whatever it needs to be translated into. I could get a smell through intuitive communications, and my senses will translate that into a smell. So anything could be sent through this.
But it has a particular signature of the person who's sending it.
Oh,
it
yeah.
Its own
So getting
flavor.
back to that, yeah. Whenever I got a communications, there would always be this peripheral information. It would be surrounded by all this texture, I guess you can say, of a communication. And each entity, I only had communications with 2 entities, but each of them had a completely different texture around it.
Right. And you said in your previous interview that you had no idea of what they actually looked like. That wasn't conveyed to you.
No.
Do you think that they deliberately withheld that because they didn't want you to know what they looked like? Because they could have described that. They could have.
Yeah, they could have, I guess. And, you know, I might have asked, too. I can't really remember. But I could definitely have gotten a picture of them had they wanted me to know that, yeah.
So do you actually miss communicating in that method? Is it?
Well,
because if you were taught to speak and suddenly you weren't able
yeah,
to, it would be frustrating.
That's true. You know, my memory of it is such that I think it serves as a satiating, you know, for that particular need. I think my experience overall really soured me to the entire thing.
Yeah.
But I do miss communicating with an entity like that because of just how different it is.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting experience, and any interesting experience is something that you would probably want to revisit. Yeah.
Right. And how did they manage to contain the comms when you were sat there in the 4-hour period that you were sat there, or what have you? Why didn't they communicate with you when you were on holiday or any other time?
Actually, they communicated
because you weren't aware geographically or physically where that entity was.
No,
it could have been elsewhere in the galaxy.
Oh yeah, anywhere. And that's why I say I don't think the communications were based in physics, because I don't think they were,
well,
you know,
known physics.
Yeah, known physics, our physics.
Yeah.
You know, the stuff that we've revealed so far. Yeah. So because I think that they were not probably on the planet. I think they were somewhere else.
Have you ever tried to communicate like this with another human, or read their mind, or try to train someone else on how to do it? Or
I think it would literally be impossible for somebody to do that without the equipment that I was trained on.
If you had another human who had been trained and they were in this room, do you think you could strike up comms?
It would. I don't know. I just don't know.
So if we can find another whistleblower like you, that would be a good experiment.
Yes.
All right.
I just don't know. I don't know if it's only between human and an alien mind. I don't know.
Right. Well, here's a question, Dan. We were talking about this earlier. You were communicating with a terminal, so there's some kind of intuitive link between you and a terminal. Mm-hmm. Is it possible for the two terminals to then communicate with each other? Would you imagine the technology?
I think the
when I say I don't mean terminal, I mean the device that was receiving your comms.
Yeah.
Would it be possible so that, in other words, a person who doesn't have the ability could use that technology to
Yeah, I have to say no, only because it does make sense that it would be able to be that way. But why else would they train all these people if they had the technology to do it between some sort of... And that's why it leads me to believe that perhaps there was an alien that was facilitating that comms with me in training.
Right. And
it wasn't just a machine, although he was interfacing with the machine itself to you know, so I can see what's going on. But
or it could have been another intuitive communicator who was like advanced trained or something.
It could have been. You're right. But I don't know why. I can't give you the reason why, but I tend to think that it's only between human and alien.
Right.
But I could be wrong, because they did tell me, and we haven't gotten into that, but they did tell me that the entire reason for the PPD project was to create this network of communicators throughout the world so that in the event of an electromagnetic communication outage in the future, which they say is going to happen, the world's leaders and you know, the movers and shakers, they would still be able to communicate even though all communications have ceased. Right. So that leads me to believe that unless it's highly inefficient, that we could do it between intuitive communicators, but I don't know that. Maybe at a later point, if I hadn't gotten out of the military, maybe I would have graduated to that type of scenario, but I never did.
So did they elaborate on this loss of comms? Did they say whether it would be natural or through a weapon or? No. They didn't. Did they seem adamant on that, or do you think that could have been a cover story?
They could very well have been a cover story, yes.
Right.
But
you see, what I was saying
makes sense,
it could have been a cover story so that you're not asking about abduction reports. Maybe it was just you were just monitoring abduction data, perhaps.
Sure.
And they were giving you a reason for why you were taught in this.
Yes, no? I've come to understand that you never take anything at face value with the military.
Right.
Never.
Okay. Yeah, and I just want to talk about you've said that your mother was, you think, abducted. You've partly answered that because you said you think it was an alien abduction. So it wasn't a MILAB, what they call a MILAB, military abduction. No. You don't think so?
No.
Okay. All right. And does your mother have any knowledge of any of this?
She has told me in the past that she doesn't remember anything like that. But
if you follow the UFO phenomenon, people who allege abduction often don't have conscious memory.
She has seen UFOs before. She says she remembers when she was young, and it would have been around the time that because she had me when she was 17. Mm-hmm. So she has early memories of seeing a UFO. Right. She doesn't. It's very murky though in her memory. She says it's very, very ethereal. It wasn't a lot of concrete information.
Which is often the case with abductees.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned that you thought that possibly genetics had been tinkered with in the past, and that you said that your genetics possibly in the womb when you were enhanced. Now this is allegedly what the current abduction program, if there is one, is about. It's about they're changing human genetics. If you listen to certain people who research this, what's your view on that?
I haven't really been following it, but based on my experience, I think it's entirely possible. There could be, I mean, you know, I was involved with one alien project, but there could be, you know, dozens of them. I know that there's probably research and development projects having to do with alien technology and alien existence. So it's quite possible that they have another reason to be abducting people.
Right. And we can take from this that the military, specifically the NSA, have been collaborating with ETs for decades. And would you imagine that that's still going on?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now what's, okay, if you've got a collaboration like that, generally there's some kind of hierarchy. Someone's wearing the trousers, in other words. How do you think that pans out?
I think it's a shell within a shell within a shell. You know, I think there are hierarchies within the military that the upper echelons don't even know about. And you know, the higher level people in the military, they have a lot of autonomy in what they do. And you know, they can request certain people to replace them. You know, they have input as to who replaces them. And this could all be within the context of...
Right, and do you think the secret society is involved in that level as well, or not?
Well, the term that we ascribe to, you know, the secret society, we always think of Knights Templar and things like that. But I think there could be I don't like to say secret society, but I think that there could be a sequestered group of people that coordinate, and I think that it could very well be at the presidential level with certain presidents. Right. I believe that President Reagan knew about this. I don't believe that a lot of the Democrat presidents probably are briefed in it.
Yeah, but the ones with military backgrounds generally.
I think that the presidents who have a conservative ideology, I think, are probably briefed into the project.
Right. Okay, so my final question for you, Dan, is Why isn't this on CNN? Because to me, this is huge. This is massive. So, mainstream media, have they approached you? Have you approached them? What's the situation there?
Well, I've done some interviews in local papers and things like that, but you know, this is the magic question in this industry, you know, or in this space. There's not a lot of evidence that people can bring out of these places, and they do that for a reason. They set up the entire system so that it's very, very difficult to get any hard evidence of what you're doing. And without hard evidence, there's so much in this genre that is muddied by all the what the world would call crazy people, you know. And there are some crazy people in this industry, you know. So you know, and so those people that come out with their stories and that are fantasies or are just from crazy people. Yeah. It muddies the scene so that when there is credible information, you know, people who have a credible background, who, like myself, that came out of the military, that I was in classified projects, and when they come out, it just gets covered by all this other stuff, and you just are lumped in with the crazies. So
you don't think then that the NSA has influence over the mainstream media and keeps them off those subjects?
I wouldn't say that they don't have any influence. I think they have great influence when they want to wield it. But again, I don't think they need to wield too much when people like me come out, because first of all, they'll research it. They want to know everything about what I know and what I can prove and all that stuff. I'm sure I've got a big old huge file in somewhere at somebody's office. But as soon as they realize that, okay, he doesn't have any evidence of anything. He hasn't said anything that's going to uncover something that we could try him on, like the revealing of black projects or things like that. So now we just leave him alone, because he'll just get meshed in with the crazies.
Right.
And why bring more attention to it by going after him?
Yeah.
If we go after him, then everybody and their grandma is going to go, oh my gosh, he's saying something that is worthwhile.
Yeah. And what we say to my friend, who's he's in the RAF, the British Air Force, and he's wing commander, who possibly wouldn't believe you. What would you say to him as a fellow Air Force person?
Well, I think it's for any military person, even the higher up military people, if they really think about it, there are so many different things going on in the military that they have no clue about. Right. And unless you're briefed in that situation, or you have the security classifications and the need to know and all that stuff, he knows, I know he knows, that there are so many things in the military that he does not know about, because he doesn't have the need to know and the security classifications and all that stuff, the security clearances. So I would say that it's kind of naive to think that you can say yay or nay to anything that somebody says about the military. That's just naivety.
Okay. All right then, Dan. Well, thank you very much indeed for coming over to the UK.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Fascinating listening.
Appreciate your time.
And I'm really looking forward to your talk tomorrow. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.